Hi, everybody. Dan Illman, Mike Beer, taking a look at the DRF race of the day for Saturday, December the 7th. It's race number 9 at Aqueduct, one of 4 graded stakes races on the card. This is the Grade 2 Cigar Mile. Let's take a look at the field. It's a full field. It's a competitive field, and you can access free Formulator Pass performances for the Cigar Mile on the Race of the Day event page at DRF.com. Take a peek. Handicap along with us. This is a really good field, Mike. One of our favorite races of the year. And you've got a couple of horses that just placed in Breeders' Cup races. Mulligan stretches out after finishing third in the sprint. Post time back to one turn after finishing second in the dirt mile.
Yeah, there's a ton going on in this race. They have first of all, you have a really good 3-year-old drawn to the rail here in Bookham Dano. You have a really good 4-year-old drawn to the far outside post in the post time who you were just talking about. And there's a ton going on between these two horses, Dan. This is a really tough race to decipher. The most interesting part to me was trying to take apart this pace.
And let's throw up the Timeform US pace projector because Timeform US believes the pace will be fast. Nelson Avenue should show some speed. Whether Nelson Avenue is of the quality of some of these other horses is a question. I know Repo Rocks has been close in his last few races, but he's far from a blazer. I think Pipeline is going to get forward, and I really think Mulligan's going to get forward.
I thought they would be more aggressive with Mulligan this time too than they were at the Breeders' Cup last time. Listen, I'm not going to argue with Nelson Avenue, being a projected speed in here because that's how they've been riding him. I'm just not sure that he's fast enough to get there. I felt sort of the same way about Repo Rocks. To me, when I look at especially a horse like Pipeline, Dan, to me, he's just a horse who he cannot win if he doesn't make the lead. And I'd be really surprised if they weren't on ascend here.
If the pace is hot, keep an eye on the 9, Senor Buscador, who was second in this race last year and is cutting back in distance after competing in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But we'll start things off with the very good 3-year-old, the number 1, Bookham Dano. Here's his most recent start. The Grade 3 Perryville at Keeneland going 7/8 of a mile. And you can make the argument that at this point during the meet at Keeneland, speed did very well. And Bookham Dano sort of gets caught in a box for a little while. He's got to look for some room. He finally gets some. And when he does, he comes running and he just misses.
Yeah, I mean, he runs fine in here. He did stay towards the inside in this race. He didn't really have much of a choice, Dan. If you watch the head on, it's a little bit tight there when he's trying to come through between horses. He still had his shot to win. He couldn't quite get up there. The horse that won the race, listen, the horse was a pretty big long shot, but that made him 3 for 3. And he just sat a good 4 wide all the way around the turn. It's not like that horse lucked into the win. I didn't think anyway. Bookham Dano ran fine. The real question for him, I think anyway, is, does an extra furlong do him any favors here? I don't know if it does or not. It's not like the 2 1-mile races are poor performances, but he might be a little bit better going a little bit shorter.
The Perryville has so far produced 6 next out runners. None hit the board with the best buyer of 89. So he's certainly taking a step up in class as well as distance, but he showed his ability going 7 to when he won the Woody Stevens during Belmont Stakes weekend. Nelson Avenue is the number 2. This horse does have some good early speed, but he was beaten last time out on the 49er, a 1-turn mile race where he set a legitimate pace, and Coastal Mission just was better than he was, I thought.
That's exactly how I looked at it too. And this horse didn't, he certainly didn't run poorly in there. And he's been a really good claim for Wayne Potts, who's on a good run here at Aqueduct since they left Saratoga. He's just been on a good run up here. This horse's recent form is good. He ran fine in the 49er, but like you, I just thought Coastal Mission was better than he was. And this pace scenario is totally different.
Repo Rocks is the number 3, and this horse is a multiple graded stakes winner. He handles a 1-turn mile. He really likes Aqueduct. I know Jamie Ness was very upset with the trip this horse pulled in the Parks Dirt Mile last time out. He just felt he was way too aggressive with him, and he wound up battling on the lead, and Coastal Mission swung right by him in the stretch and got him. Last time out in the 49er, they did seem to take him back a little bit. He ran okay. I was expecting a little more, though.
Me too. Did they overcompensate, Dan, last time out of that Parks Mile? Where I guess they didn't want him hooked up, and he actually ran really well. I don't think it would be hard to argue that he ran better than Coastal Mission did in the Parks race. That certainly wasn't the case last time. But they did rate him. They sort of sat on the rail the entire way. He spent a lot of time racing in behind horses. And then when he did get some room, he just didn't really have that much to offer through the stretch. I don't know, man. I'm sort of conflicted about his last race. All I can do, Dan, is judge him based on, all of the races that I've seen with him. He's been around for a long time. And I know that he got really, really good for a spell there early last year, but I've never really been a believer in him. And I'm probably not going to bet him in here.
Number 4, Vinsanity, is going to be a giant price in this race. He's hard to endorse on paper. His most recent win did come at the one-turn mile at Aqueduct, but it was against $25,000 condition claimers. Last time out, he was beaten in a starter allowance race. This just looks too tough.
Yeah, there are a bunch of horses in here that it's sort of interesting to try to make cases for, and Insanity is not one of those.
Mulligan reeled off 4 consecutive wins. He was placed very well by an expert and underrated trainer. When he won the Forgo 2 starts back, he just went right on the engine. He set a legitimate second quarter mile, and they couldn't get to him. Now, maybe he wasn't facing the best sprinters in the land. And in the Breeders' Cup Sprint, when they cut him back to 6, he couldn't keep up in the early stages, and maybe that worked against him. Let's watch Mulligan's effort in the sprint, because he's far back. This race is kind of controlled up front. He has to swing to the far outside, and he is making up late ground.
Yeah, he runs pretty well in here, I thought, actually. I didn't expect him to be as far back early as he was there. It did sort of seem like Pratt maybe made that decision on the fly there, that they were going in front of him, so he decided to take this horse back a little bit. It wasn't a terrible decision, Dan. He's running at the end of this race, and he's making up late ground, but it's too late. I actually feel like he ran really well in there, and I was conflicted about him going into the Breeders' Cup because I wasn't sure how good I thought he was, even on that winning streak on the way in. I thought he ran really well last time. We'll see if he gets the mile. If he gets it, he's a major player in here.
Very good at 7 and stretching
Yeah.
out from 6 to the mile. I think he's going to be able to work out a good trip sitting just off of Pipeline and maybe the number 2. The 6 is Law Professor, who's been a rock solid horse for a long time. He's a millionaire for Rob Atras, and he returned off a fairly lengthy layoff going a route of ground last time out at Aqueduct. Let's watch that race going 9 furlongs. It wasn't the toughest field in the world. The horse on the lead, Ben Doog, is okay. The pace wasn't very fast. I think Law Professor was solid in here off the layoff. He had to work a little bit to wear down this favorite. I think it's exactly what Atras was looking for in a prep.
I think that's probably right. He got a great ride in this race too from Carmouche because he made the lead early, but they were, happy to let Ben Duke take over, stalk him, drive him down through the lane there. I just think he's an underrated horse, Dan. We're talking about a Cigar mile field here that's really, really solid. I don't know that there's any superstars in here though. So it just makes me feel like Law Professor, he might not be overmatched by these horses. Cutting back to a one-turn mile, no issue for this horse. He loves Aqueduct. You were talking about Repo Rocks like an Aqueduct. This horse loves Aqueduct. I could use this horse at a price.
Locked, the number 7, was one of the better 2-year-olds in 2023. He won the Grade 1 Breeders' Futurity at Keeneland, then ran a fine third in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile behind Fierceness. Now, unfortunately for Locked, he missed most of his 3-year-old campaign, but Todd found a good spot for him, going 7/8 off the layoff in an allowance race. And this is a similar situation as Law Professor. I think it was a perfect prep. It's not like the pace was very fast and had to work hard. And once he makes the lead, he goes about his business and wins very easily over 2 minor next out winners, and he got a very competitive fig.
I think you have to just love the way he finishes this race off through the lane, Dan. I don't think there's, a ton of quality behind him. There's some older, hard-hitting horses, though. And when you take the layoff into account, this horse just missed so much time. And I also thought it was sort of notable the way that Velasquez rode him in there because he was not going to let that pace get away from him there. He actually chased it. He did a lot of chasing in there, which I thought was kind of odd, especially around the turn. I mean, this horse was in a drive around the turn to keep up with the leader, but he just overtook that horse, kept going through the lane. I thought it was a perfect comeback for a horse who showed a lot of quality as a 2-year-old.
Then you can make an argument he's so lightly raced that there's still some upside for him, and distance is obviously no problem for him. Pipeline, I agree with you, is probably the speed of this race. He got back to form last time out with a gate-to-wire performance and a third-level allowance at Churchill, beating Ben Doog, who came back and ran second to Law Professor with that 97 Beyer speed figure. Cherie DeVoe wanted to run him in the Breeders' Cup. He had some issues shipping. I think he banged his head, needed some stitches, and thus was a vet scratch. So he's coming off this race into this race off a little bit of a layoff, but his speed is dangerous. And we saw last year around this time of the year, speed killed Cigar Mile Day.
Yeah, that's right. You always have to keep that in mind. Watch the earlier races on the card and see what happens. I do think that they'll just be on ascent here, but you just start going through his PPs, and this goes all the way back to when Chad Brown had him, Dan. When he makes the lead, he's capable of some good things. I mean, he's got some fast races on the go back. He's never really, shown up in the major Grade 1 races, although a couple years back, they ran him in the Grade 1 Forgo sprint, and he ran huge that day to hit the board. I think he's going to make the lead in here, and if they don't go after him and make him race a little bit early, he can be tough to catch.
Senor Buscador was second in this race last year, but you could make the argument that he was simply compromised by the way the race was run and the way the track played. It was a muddy track that favored speed. The horse on the lead freaked out and went gate to wire, and Senor Buscador came with his usual run and got second. He was in really good form at that point in time. He just missed a national treasure in the Pegasus. He got the big payday in the Saudi Cup, and he ran well in the Dubai World Cup. Now, if you want to make the argument he hasn't come back as good, that's fine. I thought his Breeders' Cup Classic was an underrated race. Did he get a great setup? Yes. Did he get a great trip? Yes. He was able to save ground. He tried to move with Sierra Leone. He couldn't go with that horse, but he was running on a little bit at the end. I think he's getting back into form, and I've always liked him as a one-turn miler.
Yeah, I think your point about the Breeders' Cup anyway is well taken, Dan. I mean, he's not good enough to beat those horses, but he ran his race there, and to me, that's the best he could have done in there. And he got fifth. There's nothing wrong with that performance, especially when you take the California Crown into consideration. I don't know what that was all about, but he was terrible that day. But he really bounced back. Your point's well taken about the one-turn mile, too. That is no issue for this horse. He wants them to go fast early, and if they do, you'll know this horse late.
Coastal Mission is the king of the West Virginia breds. He's very, very good. He's won 14 of 25, and Jeff Runco's managed him very well. They ran him in the Parks Dirt Mile. He got the setup that day, but he had to swing to the outside, and he was able to wear down Repo Rocks. Right after that race, he said, we're going to the 49er. He's going to like the one-turn mile. He was right. Here he is in the 49er, getting the job done. Nelson Avenue's up front. Coastal Mission does have some work to do, but the pace was to his liking, and he's just better than Nelson Avenue is. The third place horse came back to run second in an $80,000 optional claimer with a 94 buyer.
Yeah, and that's Repo Rocks down on the rail right behind those two horses. He's just not really kicking on. At the end, Coastal Mission is just better than these horses, Dan. I think you put it perfectly. He got a really good trip in here, but he was confidently ridden throughout. He's just the best horse in the race. His recent form is fine, but if he just shows up here and he runs his 49er back, he's not beating this field.
Coastal Mission, the king of the West Virginia breds. Post Time, the king of the Maryland breds, and he ran huge in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile last time out. Sheldon Russell did everything right. Post Time doesn't have a lot of pace, but there was pace for the closer to attack, and Sheldon found all the right holes while saving as much ground as possible. Post Time's going to kick it into gear right here, get the split in between horses, and he's gaining on a very sharp long shot winner in Full Serrano, a horse that maybe didn't get enough credit on the way in, but Post Time ran big.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, he's really running at the end of this race, and it's just gonna be too late, Dan. He got a little bit too far away, being last up the backstretch. You're right, Sheldon. He made all the right moves. You could see him on the second turn too. He started to edge to the outside, like he was gonna have to swing wide. He didn't do it, and it worked out. He got to see him through the stretch. This horse really ran last time. He's just really good, Dan. He can't afford to give away too much ground in here, but I never really viewed him as a dead one-run closer. I think he can get a good trip in this race.
And he's a proven commodity, certainly over a variety of distances, especially the one-turn mile. Before we take a look at our top selections, please click the subscribe button on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel for the latest DRF videos. Top pick time for the Cigar Mile. We're both going to go with Post Time in here, but I do want to use Senor Buscador, a horse that you don't have. I thought his Breeders' Cup Classic was a return to form, and I can see him kicking late. Trips are going to be so important in a race like this.
They really are. I don't have Senor Buscador in there. I wasn't quite sure that this pace was going to be blazing, but I guess we'll see how it plays out. Like you, I just think Post Time might be the best horse in the race, and I do think he can get a trip in here. So I have him on top. Locked is the horse that I have second. There's a ton of upside here. I think this horse is good. I've always thought he was good, and I liked his return race. The only real, price I tried to get in there was Law Professor. And I don't even know how big a price he could be, but he likes this track, and he gets the one-turn mile.
Mike's going 11, 7, 6, and 5. I'm focusing my plays with the 11 and the 9, the 3-year-olds, the 1 and the 7 underneath. It's the Grade 2 Cigar Mile, one of 4 graded stakes races, a super Saturday afternoon of racing at the Big A. Best of luck.
Hey friends, you look like you're in need of a winner. If you enjoyed the great content right here, just click and subscribe right here and enjoy the great DRF.com race of the days, the phenomenal stakes previews, and so much more. Many of that content featuring me and my exceptional selections. Trust me, you won't regret it.